we also see a lot of business owners when we start in the relationship with businesses. The general request would be, you do it. If this is your best opinion, we trust you. You came from the reputable recommendation, and we just sign on the dotted line. That would spark the questions in my head, like how long you gonna carry on as a business owner if you have such an attitude. Because contrary to the successful business owners I see and I work with, they would ask the questions and they will explain and they would know the data. And this is the difference I see between the successful business owner and the amateur.
Guys, Matt Haycox here, and welcome to another episode of the Matt Haycox Show, where I'm joined today with our special guest, Elena Meskhi, who I am told is the most fun and most optimistic accountant that there is. I was preparing a bit of a bio or an intro for you, and when I got as far as that, I thought, well, that's all I need to say, because how better than to remember an accountant as the most fun and the most optimistic. But Elena is genuinely an accountant. Been in England from Russia for 16 years now. She runs an accountancy practice. She's an author. She's a public speaker, and we've been having a little conversation before we started recording, which I think is going to be really, really interesting, because anyone who follows me regularly will know some of the things I talk about, with accountants, with business owners, lack of understanding of accounts, and really even more worrying than the lack of understanding is their lack of care for the understanding of accounts. So I know these are some of the things that Elena likes to talk about. So let's get on with it. Thanks for joining us, Elena.
Hi, Matt. Thank you very much for having me on your podcast. That's really pleasure. I'll be honest, I looked through your profile. I've been following for a while, and quite intimidating, male-dominating audience. So
There's nothing intimidating about me. I'm very, very friendly, very cuddly.
Okay. So thank you for having me. Fine. Especially now, it's sounds so relevant. Crisis and recession, and just a few months ago, I have been sharing in the stories the potential economic forecast saying that, guys, we're in recession. It is here. Get up with your finances, make sure it is up to date. Not far from that period we were in August, September, that the redundancy is going to happen, and the timing will be hard. And here we go. The first thing I'm opening this morning in the news: Amazon letting people go, Salesforce letting people go, and we living in the interesting times.
Well, we are, and I talk about the layoff of some of the staff from these big companies with my team, but not so much in the context of profitability of our businesses, but I think we as an employer, as I'm sure most employers, I say in the UK, I can't give first-hand experience with the rest of the world, but it's been very, very difficult to employ decent caliber staff at anything like sensible pricing with anything like sensible terms for a long time now. And we can talk about the whys and wherefores that it's happened. We can blame COVID, we can blame entitlement of Gen Z or whatever we want to blame. But regardless of the reason, the facts are it's a very difficult labour market as far as employers are concerned. I think people. What am I going to try and say here? I've been fed to me for a long time that Matt, you're a dinosaur. You need to get your head around the fact that work from home is going to be the norm. Flexi, this is the norm. Hybrid, the other is the norm. Well, and my simplistic view is I know what I think works best as an employer, and whether I'm right or wrong, I'm paying the bill. So that's how we're going to do it in my organisation. But unfortunately, it's been very difficult to do that when positions in certain divisions like digital marketing, anything technology related, anything marketing wise, been very, very tough. But I've been and I don't want to say this obviously in a gloaty way for people who are losing the job, because obviously it's terrible for anyone losing a job. But I have been relieved to see the start of these big layoffs, because they look like big layoffs, but these are just the beginning. I mean, when Amazon shed 10,000 employees, that is only the bit. I mean, these guys have got millions of employees to go. They can do 10,000 a week, and it probably won't even be noticed. The same with Apple, the same with Google, the same with Twitter. And when those guys are starting to have those layoffs, it's only going to start to filter down the system. And there will be a point in time where, whether it's next quarter, whether it's at the end of this year, where ultimately that is going to impact in a positive way for the SME sector. And once again, I believe we will be able to start to hire decent employees at at fair market rates on fair terms. So I mean, I don't want to take advantage of anybody's misery, but this was a long time coming, and as tough as anyone thinks it is, it's only the beginning. But like in any market, I think the cream will rise to the top, and there will always be a home for good anybody. Good accountants, good marketeers. Good entrepreneurs can thrive in any environment.
Totally agree with you. And even more relevant podcast of yours is that people who got fired and who will be going through the redundancy, I'm sure there will be the happy percentage of the people who finally got that opportunity, and stood up on their own feet and get on with the business idea they have. And they've just been, procrastinating and enjoying the warmth of the employment and the security rights and everything. And now I think this is what's gonna create the boost to the economy. How controversial that could sound, but the redundancy from one side, but that redundancy will push people to go ahead and finally go after their dream and finally start the business and start the idea, maybe join in partnerships, maybe explore something new. So it's going to be a good thing. You always have to stay positive and look for the opportunity rather than enjoying their own misery and sacrificing something. So very good timing to start a business. I think the crisis is the best time to start the business. A lot of businesses gonna go belly up. Some of the business owners who were reluctant to change, who were bearing under the sun and ignoring the financial education and financial data completely, they will be going out of the business, but that's gonna create the window of opportunity for the new businesses or for the business owners who is happy, who is eager, who is ready to change, who is ready to adapt. It is a Darwin's law that the most livable species are the most adaptable one. That as soon as you can get used to the change, and you can use that diversity and use that change to your advantage. When I was researching for my book, Rewire Your Business for Success, we came to identify that the most businesses going out of business because the business owner does not prioritize their own needs. They taking care of everybody around in the team, employees, suppliers, contracts, insurances, licenses, whatever they have, but they always neglect themselves and they put themselves at the bottom line. No surprise, they don't have any money after they paid everybody. They have only peanuts left. So part of having peanuts and no financial, fundamental stuff to cover your basic needs, that will lead to the burnout, because people with no food, not far you can go with that just on your enthusiasm, because you've got a great idea. So you have to prioritize, you have to know your personal budget, and that personal budget plus 10% have to be your break even for your business, and that should be your first target. If you don't have it as a target, then you've right. You can't go very far on pure enthusiasm and your passion. Matt, you gone through the tough times. I've what I know from your story, isn't it? What do you think about the financial priorities?
I mean, so I went bankrupt in 2008, and I mean, it was. I always say it was a byproduct of the recession of the credit crunch that was starting in 2008, which is true to a degree. It was. I guess it was caused by the lack of liquidity that was there from my lenders. But again, if I'm being really honest and really critical about it, it wasn't the lack of liquidity of the lenders. If I'd have been better prepared for it, months if not years earlier, then it would have either never happened or I would have been able to weather that storm. And ultimately, I was very overgeared. I was very over leveraged as a business. It was a time, I mean, it was my first cycle in business, really. I mean, I was 22, 23 plus, and I was opening nightclubs. I'd got introduced to lenders at a time that the economy was very buoyant, and lenders were desperate to put money out the door, and they were eager and greedy to lend, and I was naive and hungry to borrow because I wanted to grow the businesses, and I was, I guess I was probably taking money on terms that ultimately would be unsustainable, and really that was why things went wrong for me. If I'm being honest about it, we always like to blame external forces, but ultimately, we're all in control of our own destinies, to one degree or another. But I guess what was interesting from that point, a bit of a tangent to where we're talking, but something interesting for people to listen to is when I went bankrupt, and when those lenders effectively lost money to me. People at the time, people in the financial industry at the time were saying, you know, things will now change. The economy, the economy will never be so relaxed and buoyant for financial institutions ever again. We've been crazy over the last 8, 9, 10 years lending money on the terms that we've lent. Everybody's learnt the lesson, and it'll be a much tougher credit market going forward. And the reality is, people never learn the lessons. They have a year or two of, let's say, retreat, not because they've learned any lessons, but they've got no choice but to retreat because they're probably bruised, battered, and broken, and they've got to take a couple of steps back. And then they go forward again, and greed and hunger and ambition, will kick in and will override. And if we look at, okay, right now it's a tougher borrowing market, but let's go back a year and the 10 years prior to that. I mean, that made the 2000s look entry level. I mean, in the last 10 or 12 years, there's been financial products that people never even knew existed back in 2004, 5, 6, 7, 8. There's been more lenders, there's been more aggression to learn. These guys don't learn the lessons. Whether it's lenders, whether it's business owners, and I think ultimately, we blame the economy for our downfall, but I would say it works the other way around. Economies don't make businesses, but businesses and business owners make economies. And we always like to blame somebody else, but I think ultimately, we've all had our hand in it.
Totally. And the consumerism does not help in this situation, especially when we are in the crisis. And consumerism from the bad side, as an accountant, I see it. I think the last week I was doing the usual grocery shopping order, and the card I was paying with offered me to buy now, pay later. And I thought to myself, like, why would they be allowed to do that to the consumers, taking the food now and paying later? This is clearly pushing people beyond the debt, which is sounds to me very wrong. When people trying to buy their first house to live rather than renting it out, they taking them through all different complexities and fit for purpose and how much you earn, and go through this and that, and different hardships of application to obtain their first mortgage to buy the property to live. And here you buying the food and they say borrow money from us to buy food. That's clearly putting people in such wrong environment, and even letting them. Why the financial institutions would let people do that? And I'm sure there will be people who would go and take that opportunity, get food now and buy later. And yeah, the financial sense does not really make sense in here.
Well, look, you've mentioned the words financial education for business owners earlier on, and I want to use that to pick up on something that we were about to talk about before we started recording. Now, one of my let's say pet peeves or things that things that I like to talk about and try and advise other business owners about is the importance of financial education. And I say financial education. I mean, I actually say it in the context of every department. I mean, I strongly believe I haven't got a department in my business that I don't know enough about to not get screwed over. So a lot of that is down to because I have personal interest in some of these topics or some of these areas, but I also do it from the perspective of of ultimately needing to protect myself, and whether that's digital marketing to be able to hold a conversation with someone about SEO or AdWords, whether it's having a loose enough understanding of operations to be able to argue with a warehouse manager, or whether it's understanding law to talk to a lawyer, or whether it's understanding accounts to talk to an accountant. For me, it's absolutely essential as a business owner that that you have all of those skill sets. Now, look, you're always going to be better in one than another, and that's fine. But I think it's lazy slash absolutely stupid slash ultimately suicidal to not to as a business owner to not have the fundamental knowledge in those different divisions, particularly accounts. And what I find, and I see this from a couple of different areas, because one is obviously my day-to-day business is providing loans to SME businesses in the UK, and we will very often obviously be contracting with a business owner. We'll ask them for some financial information, or we'll ask them to give us some detail on the financial information. And these would be questions that I would think should be simple to answer. And the response is always the same. Oh, I'm going to have to put you onto my accountant for that. He'll have to tell you, that, or they'll say, I don't deal with that stuff. That's what the accountant deals with. And I'm thinking, I look at this and think, if you don't know the answers to that, either if you don't know how to answer me in general, or if you didn't know a month ago and therefore want to look at it, I mean, you have got absolutely no chance. Because the other thing, and this isn't a criticism of accountants, for me it's a criticism of professions in general. Business owners will always say, oh, you've got to use my accountant, she's the best, or oh, you've got to use my lawyer, he's the best. And the chances are they aren't the best. There's only one best. It's just that because you don't know what you're talking about, and they've done something that you think they know what they're talking about, like they've filed a tax return, or they've produced some accounts on time for you. They naturally assume that they're very good. But the reality is, well, I don't know what the statistic is, so I don't want to be too scathing to the profession. But I have met in my career, and I've dealt with a hell of a lot of accountants, both ones I've employed and ones I've dealt with for other people, and I can count on the fingers of one hand the number of accountants that I would say they are shit hot people that I would like to work with, and that I would trust. I would entrust them with my money. I've employed and worked with plenty of accountants who are on their CV they're 100 grand a year finance directors, and they can't make a balance sheet balance. They don't realise that the P&L doesn't add up. And for me, I mean, yes, it's frightening, but it's also the norm. And like I say, this isn't a criticism of the accountancy sector, because it's the same. The lawyers, it's the same with there's so many shit people in every sector. But unless you've got an understanding of what's going on yourself, how can you possibly know who you can work with? How can you possibly know who you can trust? And for me, the amount of business owners without even the basics of financial knowledge, who can't sit there and, know the difference between a balance sheet and a P&L, know the difference between loan and an equity or cash flow or, whatever it may be. I mean, the percentage of people is absolutely frightening. And I know this is something that we started to talk about before we came on the recording, and I stopped you because I wanted it to be spontaneous and exciting conversation. So over to you.
That's totally true. We also see a lot of business owners when we start in the relationship with businesses. The general request would be, "You do it. If this is your best opinion, we trust you. You came from the reputable recommendation, and we just sign on the dotted line." And that would spark the questions in my head, like how long you gonna carry on as a business owner if you have such an attitude. Because contrary to the successful business owners I see and I work with, they would ask the questions and they will explain and they would know the data. And this is the difference I see between the successful business owner and the amateur, how they treat the data. And when the accountant is talking, they're actually picking up the those germs, how to use, how to spend, how to make the decision, and what variations and figures to pay attention to. So I totally agree with you. Having brilliant accountant is just the reflection how brilliant you are. If you understand the data and you can speak and get more knowledge from the accountant is very expensive profession for the paper shifting and just filling the boxes. Accountant knows much more value generating, when to invest, how to invest, when to make the right financial decision. And this is what the accountant should be used for, not for filling the boxes and filling the tax return. We have the operators who do that, and the accountant is actually the person who will take the financial statements of the company, and we go through the variances as the compulsory meeting we insist all our business owners have. When we actually having the conversation and like going through the figures, you have spent more or less this time. Have you noticed that when you spend less on the marketing, your turnover shrinks? Yes, it grows, but it doesn't grow as much when you spend more, because there is a correlation. There is the actual scientifically proven and data proven, with the past experiences, that the good businesses, they spend at least 10% on the marketing, and that will enable them to grow with a turnover up to 50%. And the same as if the business growth goes in line with the inflation of the market the business operate, that business does not grow, that business stagnate, that business remains the same. It's just the insignificant increase in the turnover. And some business owners, they would not understand the data. They would think, "Oh, my business has grown 10%, it's good." No, it's bad. It's bad because it's not bigger than the inflation in the country. The average household basket in the UK has increased 50%. So if your business has not grown 50%, your business stagnated. So this is a very important information which the business owners need to know and need to hear it out. So education. And when you choose the accountant, you want the accountant who actually help you to grow the business, who will talk through the data. And yes, you mentioned not criticism to the profession, but uh, I end up in the accountancy. I'm the foreigner. I came to the accountancy profession because I thought my English might not be that good. My understanding of the figures much better. So I definitely will find my way around. I like money. And this is what led me to the accountancy profession. But I'm genuinely the human person. I like talking. So just presenting the accounts and please sign on the dotted line, it's not me. I like to go into the details. Like, have you noticed that when you're looking at this figure, when this changes as well, and how is your bit? So the criticism to the whole accountancy profession, that accountants, they, not all accountants, they like talking to people and they like going into, additional training. And there is also another stigma to the profession, that if I'm an accountant, I will share the information I understand from the financial statements, and my client is going to be more educated. What if they will do it themselves, and why would they pay me for that? So it's kind of, you don't want to spill your trading secrets and educate your client, because the client will go away and do it themselves, which we operate in completely different, in completely different concept. We want our client to grow. We want our client to be more busy, more successful, so they don't have time doing their accounts. So they will come back to us, and we do it for them. One of the concepts we're starting to operate is, one of the, precluding, when we've got the lead request or recommendation, when the client will come with the request, I would like to pay less tax, I'm already very alerted, because I want my client to pay more taxes, because when they pay more taxes, when they have money to pay more taxes, it means they are profitable, they're successful, they earn more money. When the client come like, oh, I don't have money, I don't know how to pay tax, this is already the negative mentality, which will lead the business owner out of business. The same as with the crisis, when the businesses start, it's crisis, we need to cut down, we need to let people go. um, as a strategy, I think it's the second point should be on the agenda, on cutting down the expenses. The point number one should be increase your marketing budget, find your competitive advantage and try advertise and get more business. Because if you start, cutting here and cutting there, letting people out, that's already the game half lost. What do you think?
Well, 100%. I mean, and you say two things there, which are two, I guess, regular sayings of mine. What one being that we should always be looking at. I'm not saying we should ignore the expenses. And every now and again, I do like to have a sit down and cut some heads off and trim some costs. But as a business owner, you really want to be spending your focus on driving revenue, because you can drive the revenue to infinity, but you can only cut the cost to zero. And like I say, I don't want to use that as a saying for people to be lazy, because you do need to have a cost cut now and again. But my personal attitude, kind of works in spits and starts. So it'll be drive for whatever, 3 months, 6 months, 9 months, during which time I'm perfectly happy to admit that some costs are going to get a bit bloated during that time, because I think it's very difficult, if not impossible, to have a growth mindset and the contraction mindset at the same time. So that doesn't mean I want to be stupid and totally waste money, but I accept that I'm going to waste a bit of money here, waste a bit of money there, but I'm growing, and then we take a break, and then we cut, and go again. That's one thing. And I've forgotten what the other thing is, because I've been talking about that, and I can't remember. You said two things. I can't
Um,
remember.
Probably it was about accountants who do not like share their experience and educate the business owner.
No, it was literally in the last sentence or two. You said two things, and I thought, they're both things that I swear by. Anyway, I'll have to I'll have to go back and watch this afterwards and tweet about it instead. Listen, quick question for you, because I mean, obviously, talking to you is a breath of fresh air for me as a business owner. Talking to an accountant, with this kind of mentality, this kind of attitude. But I know you were telling me before we came on that you've got 15 staff or something in your business. Tell me, how do you recruit and how do you scale your business? Because I would imagine it's very difficult to go and find, little carbon copies of you, and that once you take people on, you're going to have to train them in a very specific way I guess to replicate your ethos, and it must make it very difficult for you to scale this business. But I'm very interested in what kind of people you try and recruit, and then how you train them when you take them on.
That's a very good question. I think any business owner who try to deliver the level and passion of service they deliver, everyone would find this question relevant. I came to the conclusion on this topic that you have to create the system and then you make system work. So, and don't employ yourself as a quality controller, because if you, in the attempt of controlling quality, putting yourself in charge of that, that's the road to downhill to the burnout. So think how you want the client journey, the work journey, implement the whole system, and then find the person. We recruit on different, we only recruit internally. We do not use the agencies. I burn my fingers. So I prefer to speak with any potential recruit in our company, at least couple of times. And this is a very well-known model: hire slow, fire fast. So this is exactly what I'm standing by. It takes time to find the right candidate, but we we try our best, and then you replicate. And another trick would be, once the hired candidate has proven themselves to be a very good candidate and fitting in the role and doing the job brilliantly, stop there and let them do the job. Don't get too excited that this is such a brilliant employee, such a brilliant opportunity. We'll give him more work. We will expand his responsibilities. We will give him something else to do because we're short on another project, and they clearly can do it. Don't do it. This is another road to the burnout, but the actual recruit, because people enjoying the work and hear more work landed on their head, which is not on job description. They could be very loyal, but they will reach to the point when they will burn out and leave. So stick to the job responsibility, have a regular talks with them. And if they're happy, if they see themselves progressing in any other direction, then facilitate it. If they're happy where they are, even if they want to go like in a smaller steps, adapt to it, because not all the employees in your team, or not all your members as your team, they will have the speed as fast as a business owner. And when the business owner is thinking globally, like, we're going on this market, we're going on that market, we're hiring 10 more people, and we're spreading, and we have a new project, people in the team, they taking it slowly. So don't shock them too much, otherwise that will can end up in a crisis.
Yeah, no, I mean, two interesting things you say there, and I'm going to be very careful saying two interesting things you say there, because I'm going to get to the end of the first one and I've forgotten the second one again. But no, I mean, I think, I often make the mistake of thinking everybody is like me, and when you talk about going off in different directions and doing this and doing the other, and then and then I get disappointed that that there's only one person out of 100 people who've been able to come along with me. So I think that's something I've been trying to get better at over the last months and years, of not being over critical of people who are great in their lane, but aren't necessarily any good in my lane, and I've got to accept them and applaud them for what they are. And the other thing I was thinking about earlier, and it just reminded me of something as a kid that I always used to hear my dad say. My dad was owned a business, and I guess I kind of grew up in a reasonably entrepreneurial family. But my dad used to have this expression, which was, "We promote people to their level of incompetence." It just kind of gave me some childhood memories when you were talking about when you find somebody good and they get good, keep them there, and don't start throwing more things on. And I go back to that expression, and I think I guess like what I've done in my career or what I watch other people do in their businesses. And unless we're very careful, it is what we do. Somebody's good, so we make them. We move them up the ladder, and then we make them a manager. Then we make them a this. Then we make them a that, and then they're shit at it, and we get pissed off and we fire them. And we've lost that good person because they weren't ready to be on ladder number 8, but they were amazing on ladder number 7. And now we don't have them on ladder number 7. We've fired them and we've fucked ourselves. So it's an interesting thing to always be conscious of. I mean, tell me, question for you. Let's assume you're a business owner, not you, but let's assume one is a business owner who has got a reasonable degree of understanding of accounts. Not one of these business owners who has just deferred to having any knowledge or responsibility whatsoever, but they've got a reasonable understanding of accounts, and they're going to go and hire a new accountant to practice. Someone like yourselves. What do you think the top 2 or 3 questions they should be asking that accountants are, and what kind of answers or what kind of warning signals should they be looking out for? You told me you don't like it when a client asks you how they can pay less tax. What should a client be asking their accountant, and what should they be getting worried if the responses are?
That's a very good question for the client, to what questions they would ask. I think the overall the accountant should be talkative. So when you get to speak with your accountant and when you have the first call, make sure that this is the person who actually elaborates, who explains, who shares the kitchen behind what they're doing. Ask the questions, not just taking the notes and keeping silence, but you want to have that connection with an accountant who will ask additional questions, who will elaborate on those questions, and explaining to you why they ask that question, not just because I'm making a notes and I'm very thorough, but you want to see that eagerness of communication, because this is how your relationship gonna go. You will tell the accountant the question, you want to hear the answer, you want to hear their feedback. The second thing I would be alerted as a client when I ask accountant the question, like the burning question I have, I want to hear the response. I don't want to hear I need to go and back and think, and my consultation time is blah per hour plus VAT, and we going through the process. And it's like, I have asked you the question, do I do this or do I don't do this? And I do understand all this disclaimer behind it, and that we have an informal conversation / interview, whether we are good fit or not. But the accountant should have the solid understanding for what you're hiring them for. So it's you come into them, and they, as a professional, they should be able to reply to you. Yes, there might be the particulars, the nitty gritty, which the accountant would go and check and come back to you, but the overall, you should be able to receive like 75-80% of the answer of what have you asked on the spot. And this is a good criteria to understand if you work together, would you be able to work together or not. And the last one, but not the least, is you actually have to like the person you talk to, because if you don't like the person, you would not be keen picking up the phone and talk to that person. And don't think that you hire an accountant only to speak with them once a year. You should be speaking with your accountant at least once a month, and checking on different data, and asking the questions. And the accountants, they are very good. They should be very good piece of information for the networking, whatever you need. Whether you need to have an insurance quote, whether you need to find the solicitor, the accountant, anyone, the banker, any recommendation to do with your finances, accountant should be the first person on your list you call. You call your accountant and you check with them. Do you know how to do this? Do you know if I need that? And the accountant should be able, because if we talk an accountant working with the general public, with the business owners, they should have enough knowledge to share with you, whether it is business rates, whether you purchase the property, you sell in the shares, you invest in money. So there should be bits and pieces of information the accountant would be able to share with you. So I think these are the most important things.
No, very, very good, very interesting. I mean, like I say, I didn't know what to expect as the answer, but I think what I like is it's all very commercial points. Not the not let's say boring granular number questions, but because I guess that goes with the territory. We've got to expect those bits are correct, or we need to find out they're correct. But it's all the value adds, everything on top that's what makes the difference between a good and a bad relationship and success and failure. Tell me about your book, because I know you've got a book, and I know you mentioned it earlier in this podcast. What's it called? What's it about? Where can we get it? Oh, you've got different color hair there.
Yes, it was pre-COVID. Now it's like, So the book called Rewire Your Business for Success, the 6-step method to increase profit and reclaim your freedom, for the business owners. It is the scratch on the surface what business owners would be good to look at in their financial statements, how to pay attention, how to prioritize their own financial freedom. And one of the key concepts of the book is pay yourself first. Because I'm a very strong believer, as a business owner, you have to put yourself in the middle of the game, prioritize your needs, make sure that your financial needs are met by your business, and then follow up everyone else. And uh, we do introduce this concept to all our business owners, and they find it's a revolutionizing method when they start and prioritize themselves and their finances. This is when everything starts to fall into places. They suddenly have more happiness. They suddenly, surprise, because they've got money. They don't have to live on peanuts and worrying how to make the ends meet. So as soon as they starting to get what they need from the business, which is the profit, the money they require, everything else starts to fall. They no longer on the burnout. They can prioritize the task. They start in thinking more about, I do what's important and urgent. I do what's important rather than I do the paper shifting, admin shifting, and the rest of the stuff. The book is available on Amazon, and as a part of the book, we have developed the scorecard to assess where your business at right now. Once you go through the 24 questions, it will give you the assessment of the business, where you are and what areas are required to be pay attention, more details. And then as a bonus, once you go through the test, you can get the link to the PDF version of the book. So this is the way to get the book free of charge. Small piece of literature. It's an easy read, and I definitely recommend for the business owners, if they bother about their self-education in the financial world in relation to their business, have a copy of it.
Perfect. Perfect. Well, I will look forward to sticking it on my very empty bookshelf behind me as well. So, listen, Elena, it's been fantastic talking to you. I like that you're genuinely been a breath of fresh air, an interesting conversation for me. And you guys listening to this or watching this, you really want to go back and watch this twice for me, really, because I can't overstress how serious these points are. And you've heard me talk about it time and time again as a business owner, but to hear an accountant talk about it from a business owner's perspective as well, really does hammer home how important it is. So, Elena, obviously, we know where to get your book now, but just before you go, where can people find you if they want to get in touch? Are you on social media? Can they find your accountancy practice? Can they get you on LinkedIn?
I am on LinkedIn, Elena Meskhi. I have very unusual surname, Meskhi. I'm on LinkedIn, on Insta profile, and I'm doing regular YouTube videos and all sorts of accountancy tips. I am of the profession that I'm sharing, I'm bringing it to the audience, I'm not hiding it. I'm giving all the tips straight away, whatever it is, even by listening to the reels, and we try to do it very entertaining as well. So just by tuning on our channels and follow up us, you would already have more knowledge about the financial industry and about how to run your business, what to use, and even challenge your own accountant. I mean, we also have a capacity, but you don't need to be a client of ours enjoying the benefits we generate. So sign up to our newsletter, follow up, ask questions. We're very open, we're very approachable, we're very keen to communicate with people. As I said, I like talking to people. So I would be very keen for any interested parties who would like to know more about their business.
Perfect.
Matt,
Thanks.
very much for the podcast. You're doing a great job. I'm delighted. I'm flattered that I have been your guest. You're doing amazing. Many, many years to you. I wish whenever you have time, let's meet up for
I
the
would love
real
to.
time.
I would love to. We'll do that in London for sure. Listen, guys, thank you very much for listening. As always, I am the Matt Haycox. That's TheMattHaycox on all things social. If you've been listening to this on iTunes, on Spotify, or wherever you listen to your podcasts, you can jump over to YouTube and see the version with my pretty face in. And if you don't like my pretty face and you've been watching it on YouTube, you can go and hear on iTunes, on Spotify, on iHeartRadio, and all of those many, many podcast channels. But thanks a lot. Again, thanks, Elena, for being here. And I will look forward to speaking to everybody in a future episode of the Matt Haycox Show. Thank you very much.
Thank you.